Separate the real from the fake. See, we got to get back to love. If we get back to love, then that's when we're going to get back to us.
Seems like it's never enough. And what do you say when you're...
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another installment of People Empowerment, where we would strive to change the conditions in our community. Now, you know, I always say when the show comes on, we have a special guest, we have a special guest. Well, today we have a very special guest, and it is the Honorable Congressman Brian Higgins. How you doing, sir?
Nate, great to be with you. Thank you for having me.
Awesome, awesome. Mr. Higgins is here today. He's going to share a lot of good information with us, and when this show is over, he will be very happy that you watched it, and you will be truly informed. So, Mr. Higgins, it's only a half-hour show. So I would ask you that you make all your answers as brief as possible, but still get it out.
Sure.
Get the information out. Okay? And so, tell us about yourself in 60 seconds.
Well, I have served in the United States Congress. I was elected in 2004, took office in 2005. Prior to that, I served as a member of the New York State Assembly. And I come from a family of union bricklayers and a lifelong resident of Buffalo and Western New York. Very fond of this community and try to use my position in traditional and non-traditional ways to advance the interests of the people of Buffalo and Western New York.
That was brief. I like that. Now, in my hand here, I have your bio, and it is so long, and you did so much. You have so many accomplishments until it just the show wouldn't be long enough if we were to try to go through all your accomplishments. But I see that you have been a true advocate for the community, so I must say that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Also, you originally are from Buffalo.
I am.
And as I remember it, you used to actually be in the Common Council, is that correct?
I was, yeah.
And what district was that?
It was the South District, and I served from 1988 through 2003. Yeah, 6 years.
And how would you grade your performance?
I thought we were very, very effective. We did a lot of innovative things in South Buffalo that eventually had a citywide impact. For example, we did police reorganization, and that essentially was to reduce the number of police precincts, the buildings themselves, to reflect, you know, the modern era of policing, in that, you know, you had mass production of automobiles and modern communication equipment. So you know, there was less of an emphasis on a physical building, and the responses were patrol-based as opposed to being precinct-based. And then we successfully demonstrated that response times and overall police services improved, and the rest of the city shortly thereafter went into a consolidated police precinct structure.
Okay. Now, Congressman Higgins, as far as education goes, now, I know you did some incredible things with education, obviously from your bio, and you were instrumental in the deal between M&T and the Westminster School with Dr. Reagan, is that correct?
Advocated with the Secretary of Education on behalf of their application to receive substantial federal funding.
And that program was truly an incredible success, to my understanding.
It's a great program. Essentially, M&T Bank and Westminster are partnered. Bob Wilmers from M&T Bank is highly committed to that program. Dr. Reagan is an extraordinary educator, doing great work. And the thrust, the focus of the Promise Neighborhood program is to take a comprehensive approach toward nurturing students not only in the school themselves, but in the neighborhood where these kids come from. And it's the 14215 zip code area. So it's a comprehensive approach toward safe schools, safe neighborhoods, building the infrastructure of the neighborhood, nutritional programs, and let's see what the outcomes are when there is comprehensive support service for kids who are in challenged neighborhoods.
So you had the idea, You had part of the idea, she had part of the idea, you guys came together and mind melded and instituted the program to see if it would work. Is that
Yeah, there was
the gist of it?
Yeah, well, it was more M&T and Promise neighborhoods and the Westminster School. My job was to successfully advocate on their behalf in Washington. There was a highly competitive process for federal grant money. And the Westminster School, the Promise neighborhood, was designated as one of the awardees, one of the very, very few in the entire nation. And as a result, they will receive $1.5 million over the next 5 years. Additionally, we were able to secure an almost about $900,000 grant for another component of the program dealing with public safety. So, you know, the commitment of M&T Bank, about $14 million, and toward success of the Promise neighborhood program will hopefully become not only good for the kids that benefit from it today, but it will become a model for the nation.
Absolutely.
And I want our community, Buffalo and Western New York, to be an outlier, to be a leader.
Now, and that problem was that program was really geared at the younger kids, hitting them at an early age, right? Because that is a great school.
It is, and it recognizes that it's a great school, but if kids are coming from and going back to an environment that is not consistent with a structured, nurturing environment, then it may erase the benefits they receive when they're in school. So the idea is to provide support services in that particular zip code, and let's measure, you know, progress, and let's measure outcomes so that we can determine whether or not these programs are working.
Very
and
good.
I think you'll see that this program is going to have a tremendously beneficial impact to these kids.
Okay, now let's go stay on education for a minute and talk about these programs. Now, that are the younger kids. Now, I'd like to focus a minute on the high school kids, okay, and the problem with the high school kids. Now, I'm not sure if you're aware of it, but I mean, your opponent in the Congress, Mr. Madigan, made me well aware of it, that the graduation rate for young African males in the city of Buffalo particularly is less than 20%.
Yeah.
Now, I think that that's a serious problem. Okay. Also, the attendance rates for school are horrible, and what we seem to find out here is that once a child reaches ninth grade, get into high school, things start dropping off. It starts deteriorating, and eventually a lot of these kids just drop out. And the reasons range from all sorts of things, from lack of money, lack of motivation, lack of good parenting, and such. And so I was trying to, and I have been asking some of my guests about ways that we could change that. What could we do to sort of change that, and talk about incentives for high school kids? And one of the things that I came up with, that I proposed, was, it's being done in some places, is cash stipends for high school students starting at 9th grade, and the stipends be tied into attendance and grades. Now, what's your view on that? Because I've heard both sides.
I think incentives are good. I think where you can encourage students, particularly in the high school years, those years that they're most susceptible potentially to drop out, to entice them to stay interested, stay focused, and stay in school, that's a good thing. I think, you know, we're always trying to redefine education. And I think the battle is always between, you know, those who think that teachers are bad and they think the teachers union is bad, and if the union just goes away, everything will be okay. It's a lot more complicated than that. You know, the teaching profession, it makes every other profession possible. And all of us have benefited from our educations, which have been important in helping us get to where we're at. So I think, you know, we have to look at collective action, and we have to recognize that if we're going to remain a productive society, even though I'm finished with the public school system that I benefited from, I have an obligation to contribute something to it, to ensure the kids today that are going through the educational system are curious in wanting to learn and about the world and about their particular subject matter.
Okay, so now, just like you applied that they had this program with the Buffalo Promise neighborhoods, and you did the thing with Westminster. It was something that you tried, and you're looking for the outcome to see how it worked. So as I pose these questions to you about school stipends, I mean that's not unheard of or out of the question for us to try, because it's just a matter of trying things and see if they work. Right?
Incentives are good, yes. Incentives are good, and particularly if they produce a desired outcome.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, also, what do you think about, I think that What do you think about, and this is still with education, what do you think about parents having the ability to use corporal punishment on their kids, given back to them? Because it seems to be taken away.
Yeah, I wouldn't be. I think there are other ways to entice kids to learn effectively.
Oh.
Look, I think the responsibility of parenting is a parental responsibility, but I don't know that physical consequences for actions are necessarily good. I think when we resort to that, I think it's a failure of communication and the kinds of incentives that we should have.
Well, you seem to turn out pretty well, and I'm willing to bet my life that you got spankings when you were young by your parents. Right or wrong?
I did. Nate,
Well,
you're right.
well, listen, it seemed to have worked on you. Did it correct you?
I don't know that necessarily worked. I think that, like a lot of kids in my generation, we were subjected to, getting spanked around a little bit. But I think there are other effective means of encouraging kids to be disciplined, be focused, and I think a lot of it has to do with role models. I think a lot of it has to do with examples, and there's a lot of discussion today in the education community about academic outcomes. In other words, it's not necessarily someone's ability, their mental ability to produce good outcomes, but instilling a sense of curiosity in somebody, a sense of purpose, I think is very, very important toward motivating a student in the right direction.
Well, I understand, I hear what you're saying, but that is not to say that in all cases that corporal punishment wouldn't be viable. Because, I mean, there's some instances where, you're a religious man, aren't you?
I'm spiritual.
You are spiritual?
Yep.
Did you know in the Bible there's a place where it says, spare the rod, spoil the child?
I do.
Well, me being a religious person, that has a lot of merit with me. You know what I mean? And I think that sometimes the rod may be necessary. If God thinks it, then perhaps it could be.
Right,
but
right.
I'm not gonna hold you down to that.
Okay, all right.
I'm not gonna pin you down to an opinion either way. But I think that's very important to me, and trying to maybe institute legislation to put corporal punishment back in the hands of the parents, because sometimes kids need to be chastised. I truly believe that. Okay, but so we're going to move on. Now, I would like to talk about the Davis-Bacon Act for a moment. Okay, the Davis-Bacon Act. And I had Mr. Madigan in here, and we talked about the Davis-Bacon Act, and he explained his position on it being a deterrent for minority people to move further in the job force, in the workforce. And could you explain your knowledge of the Davis-Bacon Act?
Yeah.
Davis-Bacon?
Yeah, I've supported it throughout because it requires paying prevailing wage for federally funded projects. In other words, when the federal government, for example, does a large transportation bill nationally, like $350 billion, there are Davis-Bacon provisions included in there so as to pay people a fair wage for the labor that they provide to do that kind of work. So it just, everybody plays by the same rules. And I think that, we live in a country that appreciates labor. We celebrate Labor Day every single year as the great tradition of this country. Individuals who have built this country. I come from a family of bricklayers. They were all union bricklayers, and because they were part of the union, they had certain benefits that they would not have had if they were not part of the union.
How does education relate to the Davis-Bacon Act? Could you explain that part?
Well, I don't really understand the correlation.
Well, what I'm saying is, does this mean, Davis-Bacon Act, mean that you have to have a high school diploma or some type of degree in order to move forward into the prevailing wage jobs? Or does lack of having, for say, a high school degree stop you from being able to attain a job, a prevailing wage job?
Yeah, I don't
according
think
to the Davis-Bacon Act.
Yeah, I don't think it does. In my family, my father and my uncles were very smart men, but they didn't have the benefit of a formal education after high school. So they went to work. and they were hardworking men, and they
On the
made
job training,
on the job,
apprentices,
yeah,
journeymen, master
apprenticeships,
journeymen.
all of those things. And the good thing is, when they went through that training, because of prevailing wage, because of provisions like Davis-Bacon, you know, they were able to make middle-class wages by doing, you know, labor, by becoming bricklayers. Where, you know, if you didn't have that, you know, these workers wouldn't be paid as much. So it just establishes that we should have a floor, not a ceiling, but a floor.
Certainly.
That says that for certain work, they should be paid a fair wage. And that's what
Absolutely.
Davis-Bacon does. And I would argue that Davis-Bacon is actually a vehicle to getting people the skills that they need in order to be productive in our society.
Do you, not to cut you off, do you believe that the disproportionate amount of minority youth and minorities, period, working in the city as compared to non-minorities is a big issue? Because, and the reason I say this is because there's been a lot of work done in the city of Buffalo, $2 billion spent on schools and other big projects. And if you ride around, you don't see many minority faces on these job sites. So I pose this question to you because do you believe that there should be some type of minimum requirement that so many minorities and urban citizens be made available to them through the contractors that are doing this work as part of getting work with the city? You understand what I'm trying to say?
I do, and I think part of that is access to opportunity. Look, every kid isn't going to become a teacher. Every kid is not going to become, you know, a college professor. Every kid is not going to become a doctor or a lawyer. That's okay. You know, we need carpenters. We need bricklayers.
Absolutely.
We need electricians. We need operating engineers. And in my conversations with some of the union heads, the union leaders, the business agents of the various skilled trades, we have to make these programs, these apprenticeship programs, more accessible to kids in the inner city.
How would they go about doing that? It's great.
Having a presence here. Having a presence here. If they can't have a physical presence here, recruit aggressively. You know, a good place to start is the schools. And if you have a kid, let's say, that isn't just getting it in terms of you know, their formal academic program, and they're in high school and they're getting by and they may or may not go to college, well, that may be a good recruit to become an electrician. That may be a good recruit. So even if you don't have the physical presence of an apprenticeship program in the community, you should have access to that apprenticeship program through transportation, through financial incentives, to ensure that these kids have the same opportunity as everybody else does.
Well, okay, now as far as minority quota hiring attached to some of these jobs that come into the city, do you believe that's a good idea?
Well, I think that there are provisions for minority hiring and minority contractors. I think that the workforce should be reflective of the community equally. And I do think there needs to be incentives to ensure that every worker have an opportunity to get the kind of training that they need in order to be a productive citizen. When you consider that, you know, an electrician or an operating engineer or a carpenter, you know, a well-trained carpenter through an apprenticeship program that may last several years, you end up making $60,000, $70,000, $80,000. You've developed a skill. And I'm not even suggesting that that's where they should stop. I'm suggesting that, you know, it's a good skill to have in addition to other skills. I think we have a tendency to suggest that education should stop at some point. You know how they refer to as traditional students? That means you go from pre-K or kindergarten right through college and perhaps a graduate degree without any break. I think part of the education process is to get good experience. And, you know, today's economy is very, very different. We live in a globalized economy, and I think that people will change jobs several times in their lifetime, where the previous generation, my generation, your generation, our generation, we would think that, you know, we could train for one thing and stay in that our whole lives. Yeah. That's changing a lot.
It certainly is. Folks, I want to remind you that our program is on at 10:30 on Wednesdays, and it's on at 10 p.m. on Saturday nights. And we have a website that's up now that you can go to so you can view this program and the different shows that are on it. It's called peopleempowerment.apollomediacenter.com. You can go there as many times as you want and look at the program. You can also go on YouTube and go to People Empowerment, and you can look it up and you can see what's going on with the show. This is very important information. So, you know, every chance you can get to get something important to help you, go there, do that. Again, it's peopleempowerment.apollomediacenter.com. I got to put that in. Okay, we talked a lot. We talked last. We had a lot of points. Okay, Veterans Affairs. What is it that you do exactly for the veterans? Briefly, can you tell me your relationship to?
Well,
veterans?
we have people in my office, in the district office in particular, who try to break through the federal bureaucracy on behalf of veterans, generally. And it has to do with, you know, the benefits that they have earned and ensuring that there is, you know, proper review of applications and those kinds of things to ensure that those services are accessible to our veterans.
Can there be civil rights violations in the military?
Certainly.
Certainly?
Certainly.
And is that something that your office also addresses? Do you deal with civil rights violations?
Anything. We deal with anything and everything. Some of the issues that we deal with are traditional in that there's like a trend. In other words, a lot of veterans are experiencing the same problem with the Veterans Administration. So as a member of Congress, what we do is we call the Veterans Administration on their behalf. Other issues are just, hey, look, if they're having problems that we've not seen yet, but we still have an obligation, if it has something to do with the Veterans Administration or the Pentagon, to advocate on their behalf, whatever it is.
What about legal representation for veterans when they have legal issues with the military? Because, you know, out here in the world, it's very hard to get lawyers or get legal advice or legal help when veterans come out of the service and they have issues with the military. Is that something also that you extend to them?
Certainly that we're involved with. We have worked in the past with City Court Judge Robert Russell and the Veterans Court that they establish, which is, there's advocates, veterans advocates that were very instrumental in setting up that program.
Had Mr. Russell on the show. He was very informative.
Yeah, he's a good guy, and he's a very, very good jurist. But he's also highly committed to helping veterans transition to civilian life, which is not always easy. You know, particularly, Nate, I've been to Afghanistan, I've been to Iraq, and
I'll ask you about that next.
Yeah, the good thing about medical advancement is that veterans who are injured today by improvised explosive devices, they're living where 15 years ago they weren't living, they were dying. The problem is they're coming back into society physically and mentally injured. And you see some incredible people. I'm an ice hockey player, and about a month ago we played an ice hockey game in Washington for and with the Wounded Warriors.
Wow.
There were guys out there that are skating on 2 prosthetic legs. There's a guy out there with 1 arm playing hockey. Prosthetic eyes. It's absolutely incredible and inspiring.
Why are so many veterans homeless, and why do so many veterans feel that the previous administration that was in just left them high and dry, had them over there fighting that war, dying, and then they come back to these states and they're just in miserable conditions? It seems like nobody cares.
You're right. You're right. We need to do much, much better. When you consider that the unemployment rate for returning veterans under the age of 24 is about 30%. That's unacceptable. We owe them, at the very least, an economy that is growing and that creates opportunity for everybody. Because without a growing economy, they have very little chance of coming back. And that's why, you know, we talked a little bit about the unions before. There's a program that I'm very familiar with and a big advocate of. It's called From Helmets to Hard Hats. And here's what it does. It takes returning veterans to this country, and it's with about 12 to 15 construction trade unions nationally, bricklayers, carpenters, operating engineers, and it accelerates the apprenticeship program for these returning veterans. And they have a relationship, helmets to hard hats, with 60,000 American businesses to place these veterans who already had training that instilled a sense of discipline in them. Now they're training to become a bricklayer, or as I said, a carpenter or an electrician. And that will help to boost the employment rate.
I can see that.
Sure.
Let me ask you now, we're running out of time, it's getting short. Would you please tell people briefly, take about a minute if you can or more, why should they vote for you again and keep you in office?
Well, I'm a resident of Buffalo, a lifelong resident of Buffalo, and I'm highly passionate about this community. I was also a teacher of history and economics at Buffalo State College, and I taught a course called the Economic History of Buffalo and Western New York. And Buffalo 100 years ago was among the strongest economies in the entire nation and in the world. That's not the case any longer, and I think that we became complacent. You know, we have to be in a continuous improvement mode. Whatever it is we're doing today, we have to figure out how to do it more efficiently and effectively tomorrow, because you know what? Somebody else in another country is doing just that. And we live in a society that is, you know, we're not only connected, we're hyper-connected in a globalized economy. So now, regardless of size, distance, and increasingly language, everybody can plug in and play economically. So as a community, Buffalo has great strengths. And, you know, we used to be almost exclusively a manufacturing industrial economy. Today, if you look at the growth of the Buffalo Niagara Medical Campus, employs 12,000 people today, projected to double in the next 5 years. That creates extraordinary opportunity. And that's why we tie it into education. We have to ensure that our schools are producing skilled workers for the kinds of jobs that are going to be available in Buffalo and Western New York. So the Buffalo Niagara Medical Campus and the life sciences, the financial institutions with banking, M&T Bank, as we have talked about before, First Niagara and all the other banks, all of these places are creating potential opportunities for young people that are being educated in our community and want to stay in our community and be productive citizens in our community.
Would you be willing, Mr. Higgins, to come back probably sometime after the election and talk more about things that can be done to improve our city and employment for minorities, and also things that are going to effectuate change as far as education for our kids?
I would love to. I would love to, Nate.
Because I truly believe from talking to you that you are the people's advocate, that you do advocate for the city and the community, and I think it's a big thing. But I also think that it's a big thing that the people, the urban people in the city, have decent employment. And, you know, I think it's a really big thing, and I think the more people that address it, the more jobs that will be created for, you know, the urban population. So, you know, I would hope that you would come back and be able to discuss some things with that in the future.
With a gracious invitation from you, I will come back many times.
Well, you know, I like that. I like that because I believe that together, you know, we can make some change. We can do some things. Now, I'm not sure. I guess this is about the last minute. I always hate this part because it's the end where I have to stop talking and I have to talk to the people. So, but let me say it's been very informative. I certainly appreciate Mr. Higgins coming on the show, Congressman, to tell us what he's been doing, what he plans on doing. And so I would just tell you, the people out there, pay attention, go to the website, check it out, go to YouTube, check out People Empowerment. But most of all, pay attention, pay attention, pay attention.